pleased to have you back with us again for another one of our excellent webinars. And today we have a special guest, Gary K. Boyd, who comes to us through the SATTC in collaboration with HBCU. And of course, I'm Dr. Eugene Harrington, Co-Project Director for the HBCU Center for Excellence in Behavioral Health, and Dr. Maddox is the Project Director. First, I'd like to tell you something about the HBCU before we get into today's webinar, which is titled Safety and Sobriety in Dating Relationships. The HBCU Center for Excellence was brought about through a cooperative agreement with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, known as SAMHSA, Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, CSAT, and the Center for Mental Health Services, CMHS. Through these agreements, Morehouse School of Medicine established the historically black colleges and university Center for Excellence in Behavioral Health, which we call HBCU CFE, funded as a grant number TI 023447. The HBCU Center for Excellence goals are to promote student behavioral health to positively impact student retention, to expand campus service capacity, including the provision of culturally appropriate behavioral health resources, and to facilitate best practices, dissemination, and behavioral health workforce development. As mentioned earlier, our topic today, our webinar topic today, is safety and sobriety in dating relationships, and that's going to be conducted by our guest, Gary Boyd, who is President and CEO of the Anger Management Institute and High Impact Training. Mr. Boyd received his undergraduate degree from the University of South Carolina and his Master's of Education in Guidance and Counseling from West Georgia State University here in Georgia. And Mr. Boyd is certified as a Master Addiction Counselor, a certified clinical supervisor, a certified grief specialist, a certified anger management specialist, and he also is a certified happiness coach. He's currently working towards completing his PhD degree in clinical psychology. And with those introductions, it's my pleasure to introduce Gary K. Boyd.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I want to thank Dr. Harrington for those warm remarks. Today our topic will be on safety and sobriety. Basically, as we know that safety and sobriety in substance abuse and in dating relationships, substance abuse and dating violence overlap and they often co-occur. And there are multiple causes of both substance abuse and dating violence. And today we'll explore some of those, with our objectives being to describe the relationship between addiction and dating violence. We'll discuss safety and sobriety issues as it relates to substance abuse and dating relationships. Safety and sobriety are interconnected. Lack of sobriety in the perpetrator increases the risk of further violence against the victim. Lack of victim safety threatens the sobriety of both the victim and the perpetrator, and abstinence and sobriety are not sufficient conditions for safety. Just because a person ceases to drink or use drugs, it is not necessarily a safe condition for the victim. Let's look at understanding the intersection of alcohol and college dating violence. They do intersect. Well, as we know that there's a strong correlation between particularly alcohol and dating violence. There is overwhelming evidence that suggests a correlation between alcohol consumption and violence and aggression among college students. Alcohol use has been widely reported as being involved in sexual assault cases, particularly when there is a prior relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. So we know there's a strong correlation between violence and substance use. However, I want to caution the participants in understanding that alcohol and drugs do not cause dating violence. There's a lot of people who drink and use mood-altering substances that do not cause violence. We also know that violence in dating relationships is about power and control. And most of the perpetrators who commit acts of dating violence basically know how and when to use violence. You don't find too many perpetrators who display violence at the police station. It's usually behind closed doors or in some privacy setting. Well, let's look at a definition of dating violence. The United States Department of Justice in 2012 stated that dating violence is defined as violence committed by a person who is or has been in a social relationship of a romantic nature with the victim. And there's a large number of college students engaged in unhealthy personal relationships, which hinder them from attaining maximum educational success. Well, we know that a lot of these young people are moving from home, coming to college. They have more freedom. They have more independent choices that they can make. They have little training in relationship skills. So a lot of them come and they may engage in unhealthy relationships. We know that particularly a lot of young men have basically relationship deficits, and therefore they come not knowing how to have a healthy relationship. Now, we know that dating violence is more prevalent among college students than previously believed. In a study done by Liz Claiborne, basically, Love is Not Abuse in 2011, College Dating Violence and Abuse poll, they surveyed college students, basically, and the study revealed that dating violence and abuse to be surprisingly more prevalent among college students than previously believed. Nearly half of the dating college women, 43%, reported having ever experienced violence or abusive dating relationships, and more than 1 in 5, 22%, report actual physical abuse, sexual abuse, or threats of a physical nature. So we're talking about 20% of the college women who have experienced either physical abuse, sexual abuse, or threats of violence. Well, despite these high numbers of physical and psychological violence among dating students, basically more than 1/3 of the college students say that they would not know how to get help on campus if they found themselves in an abusive relationship. So that research indicates to me that college administrators need to get the word out about how to access help, both for the victim and those who see or witness dating violence, how to get help for the victim and have a safe place for victims to basically go and talk over their struggles with their perpetrator. Research consistently demonstrates that approximately 20 to 30% of dating couples experience at least one act of physical aggression, 70 to 90% experience psychological aggression, and 3 to 20% experience sexual aggression each year. Now, psychological aggression basically is off the chain. We got 70 to 90% of our college students experiencing psychological aggression. Now, the modal forms of aggression experienced by college students is often classified as minor in severity, which includes insulting, yelling, swearing, or doing something to spite one's partner, which is psychological aggression, and then pushing, grabbing, or slapping one partner, physical aggression, and insisting on sex with a partner when he or she does not want to. Most of anecdotal data, basically, that I've experienced is that oftentimes people who have experienced psychological aggression say that it's much more devastating, much more debilitating than oftentimes the physical violence. Psychological violence leaves no, basically, individuals who commit psychological violence basically sometimes don't see that as debilitating or harmful to the victim. approximately 8 to 16% of the individuals in college dating relationships experience at least one act of severe physical aggression, basically, such as punching, choking, and kicking. 12 to 30% experience severe psychological aggression. And we're talking about severe means they threaten to hit the partner, destroy personal belongings of their partner, and 3 to 9% experience that sexual aggression. Well, the study went on to say that nearly 1 in 3, 29%, of college students report having been a victim of an abusive dating relationship in her life. 57% of the students who report having been in an abusive dating relationship indicated it occurred in college. So over half of all dating violence begins in college. Not in high school. It begins in college. So we need to have, during our college orientations, we need to talk about dating violence, the high degree of prevalence among college dating students, and how to get help if you find yourself in a dating abusive relationship. 52% of college women report knowing a friend who has experienced violence and abusive dating behaviors, including physical, sexual, digital, verbal, or controlling behavior or abuse. Furthermore, 58% of students said that they would not know how to get help if they knew someone was a victim. So we got over half of the students having their first experience with dating violence in college. And we got over half of the students not knowing how to get help for someone who was a victim. So we need to beef up on our prevention, on our awareness, and on our helping students understand what dating violence is, particularly psychological abuse, and get them to understand what that is. There was a movie out in the 1940s called Gaslight, and it was a movie where a man used psychological strategies in an attempt to drive his wife crazy. He almost succeeded if it was not for the help of an astute police officer. So we know that psychological abuse can affect a person's self-esteem, affect their ability to study, affect their ability to be successful at college. 43% of dating college women report experiencing some violence and abusive dating relationships, including physical, sexual, tech, verbal, or controlling behavior, and 1 in 5 college women report actual physical abuse. So there's a lot of things we need to do to help our college students deal and cope with dating violence. Well, let's look at this relationship between alcohol consumption among college students. Violence between college-age dating relationships is a serious problem and has been shown to be associated with substance use. Now, as you know, many students who leave home and have this freedom, they may for the first time take alcohol or experiment with alcohol at some of their frat or sorority parties. Alcohol consumption, basically, are particularly evident at our nation's colleges and universities, where college students drink significantly more than non-college attending peers. When it comes to African American college students tend to perceive dating violence more in physical terms than in psychological terms, meaning that our African American students seem to know and relate to physical violence, but not the psychological aggression that happens more often. Now, this conclusion is also supported by earlier research that indicated that there's a general tendency to classify physical forms of aggression as abuse, especially among ethnic minorities. As a result of ignoring psychological abuse, however, verbal or other types of psychological aggressions are not viewed as a problem by African American colleges. However, the psychological aggression can be, like I said earlier, just as or more devastating than the physiological. You know, something said in a moment of anger can last a lifetime. So when we say things, we know that the words can outlive the person who spoke them. So psychological abuse can last forever. Consequently, abused African American college students, especially who are victims of psychological aggression, do not perceive themselves as victims, which further prevents them from seeking appropriate help. So we have this interesting sort of symbiotic relationship here. We have the perpetrators, or college students in general, particularly males, who don't see psychological aggression as a form of abuse. And then we have the victim of psychological aggression who do not perceive themselves as victims. Now, when those two forces come together, it prevents particularly the victim from seeking the appropriate help because they don't see it as being abusive. It should be emphasized, though, that seemingly nebulous, indistinct psychological aggression can often develop into more distinct and dangerous physical violence. This is when words become fists, and they can. If we were to look at some Pavlovian models in terms of dating violence or abusive relationships, we know that probably most of the time, psychological aggression precedes physical aggression. So if we were thinking from a Pavlovian model, we would pair psychological aggression basically with physical aggression, which will elicit fear. So once the victim has paired psychological aggression with physical aggression, from that point on, the perpetrator of the abuse no longer has to use physical violence to put the victim in fear. All they have to do now is use psychological aggression, and that will elicit the fear. So we know that psychological oftentimes preceded. We also know that when the authorities are called in a dating violence or relationship violence situation, that physical abuse oftentimes decreases. However, if the couple stays together, which many do, the physical aggression may decrease, but the psychological aggression may increase. And we see that time and time again. Well, what is the impact of alcohol and drug use on dating violence? Research shows that binge drinkers, defined as consumption of 5 or more standard drinks of 12-ounce beer for men and 4 or more standard drinks for women on one occasion, perpetrates more sexual aggression than non-perpetrators. And what that means is that you got a person who is not thinking. Alcohol affects your prefrontal cortex, your ability to make decisions, your ability to think things through, your ability to look at the pros and cons of behavior. For a woman who could be the possible victim, alcohol hampers her ability also to make good decisions and make good judgments, and can put herself in a very difficult position. Last year there was a case where there were some high school students, I forget which part of the country it was in. However, they took advantage of a young lady, and they sexually abused her, molested her, and I think even a couple of the guys urinated on her. And what made it so terrible is that they videotaped this behavior and put it on YouTube. Well, these boys eventually were arrested and tried and sentenced as sex offenders because of the behavior that they did while under the influence of alcohol, and the victim was under the influence of alcohol. Substance use by one or both partners may increase the chances of arguments between partners, leading to reduced relationship quality and, in turn, aggression. As we know that alcohol and anger is a bad mixture. We also know that when you're angry, you make bad decisions. And when you're drinking and under the influence, you can make bad decisions. So here we have two powerful forces coming together where both of them cause thinking problems, where the person is not as rational, not as clear in mind. And therefore that leads to safety and sobriety issues. Well, what kind of substances tend to create more violence? Let's take a look. Anger, aggression, relationship to alcohol and other drug use. On your left there's drug group. In the middle, overall risk that they cause and why they cause it. Well, alcohol is accepted by our society. It is socially approved. We have permission to use it and expectations that it will make you feel good. The overall risk, though, for alcohol use is high in anger and aggression. Why is it high? Because it frees up our inhibitions. We also suffer from withdrawal. Basically, withdrawal from alcohol basically is when the person is likely to be a lot more irritable. And we know that irritability can cause or trigger anger and violence. One of the things about alcohol and anger and aggression is that alcohol tends to intensify whatever emotional experience the person is having. So if a person is happy and they're drinking, they're going to be happy and intoxicated. If a person is angry and they're drinking, they're going to be angry and intoxicated. So alcohol has a tendency to intensify whatever emotional experience a person may be having. Then we have its cousins, sedatives and barbiturates, or benzodiazepines and barbiturates. Again, we see the overall risk is high. Sedatives or benzodiazepines and barbiturates are really alcohol in a pill form. They do everything that alcohol does. As a matter of fact, anybody who is addicted to alcohol and also are addicted to sedatives and barbiturates should not stop using or stop drinking or stop using the drugs without medical supervision because of the severity of health problems that can result, such as seizures and even death. So we know that there's a high probability that when the person is withdrawing, that they may become more irritable, that they may be more assaultive and combative, and they may do some self-destructive acts. Another drug that's associated with high anger and aggression is crystal meth. Now, crystal meth basically is one of those drugs that we know that is neurotoxic. There is only two drugs that are neurotoxic, and that's crystal meth and MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly. Now, the long-term use of these, particularly meth, can produce both immediate aggression and long-term personality changes. Methamphetamines tend to change the structure of the brain. We know that when a person is either, and the strange thing about meth is that when you're using it or when you're coming off of it, aggression is a possibility. PCP or phencyclidine is high. Now this is a horse tranquilizer that was heavily used in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, which gave a person the strength of the Incredible Hulk when they took PCP. It produces angry and assaultive tendencies. A person becomes very aggressive when they don't get their way, easily agitated, and they become super strong. Very dangerous drug, particularly as it relates to anger and aggression. The next drug group is steroids, which overall risk is medium to high, based on the anabolic steroid that the person is using. Why is it high? It seems to encourage anger and aggression, especially in individuals already prone for anger and aggression. So this drug tends to unleash the beast in the people who have this proclivity to become angry and aggressive. Inhalants, you don't see too many college students who use inhalants. This is more of a high school thing, and usually 9th, 10th, 11th graders, basically, but the overall risk is high because it generally incapacitates the users because it damages the brain, but it also is associated with aggressive lifestyles. Opiates, on the other hand, the overall risk is medium to low because opiums generally diminish all emotions during use. And what that means is that most people, when they are using opiates, they tend to get into what we call a nod, or movement becomes slow, or body movement becomes retarded, and so therefore they may not be as aggressive as some of the other stimulants. However, we are seeing an increase in heroin use. In Georgia, heroin is back with a vengeance. We have a lot of overdose deaths of young people who are now experiencing it, and the opiates, in particular the heroin, has a different trajectory this time. Usually, like certain drugs have certain paths that they take. In the case of methamphetamine, the path was from more rural areas to more suburban areas. The path of opiate use now is from our middle class suburbs moving to the inner city. So we have an increase in opiate death as a result of there's been a decrease in the amount of OxyContin on the street, and OxyContin is a lot more expensive than buying heroin. And the heroin today is mixed with fentanyl, which makes it potentiate and much more deadly and much more serious. Then we have cannabis, marijuana, medium to low, and what we know about marijuana now, in particular in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, 5th edition, is that now we know that marijuana has withdrawal symptoms. And some of the withdrawal symptoms are irritability, anger, and aggression. Now, we also know that marijuana can exacerbate an underlying paranoia. There is considerable evidence now that indicates that a lot of people who use marijuana may develop schizoaffective disorders. So marijuana is a drug that is really confusing to the public right now because of the medicinal qualities of it. Marijuana is a good and bad drug. For medicinal purposes, it is great, but for people who are using it, the THC content is much more potent. I submit to people who want to argue about marijuana that they go to the University of Mississippi Potency Monitoring Project, and basically there they can see the increase in potency of marijuana from the 70s to 2011. And the marijuana has increased in potency, with some testing out at 33% potency rate. So marijuana for young people can be very dangerous because you have a brain that is still under construction. Even the college brain is still under construction. So, what are some of the similarities between addiction and partner abuse? They sort of dovetail into each other. Addiction is primary, meaning that it's not caused by low self-esteem, even though a lot of people who use drugs and alcohol may experience low self-esteem. Addiction is not caused by depression, even though many people who use drugs may suffer from depression. Addiction is caused by violation of quantity and frequency choices. We don't see people who come to see addiction professionals who say, Gary, I've smoked one joint in the past 2 years. It doesn't meet quantity, nor does it meet frequency. We don't see people who come to see addiction professionals who say, I drank one beer in the last 6 months. It doesn't meet quantity nor frequency. When people come to see an addiction professional, they've used too much too often, which moves them closer to their biological trigger to become addicted to the substance. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, first the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man. We become physiologically addicted. On the other hand, we know that partner abuse is not caused by alcohol. Even though it can influence it, it doesn't cause it. We know that partner abuse is not caused because you grew up in a home where there was domestic violence, even though a lot of people who grew up in those homes can be influenced by their early childhood experiences. However, none of those things cause partner abuse. The only thing that causes partner abuse, basically, is the person chooses to use power and control over their partner. Addiction is chronic. It continues until intervention. We know that without intervention, that people who consume large quantities of alcohol and other drugs, they die 10 to 15 years younger than the general population. On the other hand, we know that partner abuse is chronic. It continues until intervention. We know that addiction is progressive, means everything gets worse. Finances gets worse, relationships gets worse, health gets worse, employment gets worse. Well, with partner abuse, things get worse. We also know that addiction is characterized by loss of control. And when we look at somebody losing control in addiction, we look at their inability to predict how much they may drink or drug use, how long they may drink or drug use, or what they might do when they drink or use drugs. However, this is where a little differentiation comes about. Partner abuse is characterized by gaining control. We tell people who are in domestic violence groups or batterers intervention groups that they don't lose control of their behavior. They gain control of the situation. As a matter of fact, research indicates that a perpetrator, basically their autonomic nervous system either remains the same or calms down. Where somebody who's angry, their autonomic nervous system elevates and kicks into gear. Addiction, basically, escalation increases in frequency and amount, meaning that the more you use, the more you use. Where in partner abuse, escalation, at least for the first couple of years of a relationship, really dating violence is more of a younger age group, or even partner violence itself. People tend to maturate out of dating violence or family violence, meaning that I guess the older you get, the less violent you become. Hopefully, the more wisdom you have, the more able you are to withstand some of the difficulties in relationships. But the early years in relationships can be very tumultuous. We know addiction is characterized by denial, minimization, and blaming. In my family violence program in Georgia, we call it family violence. I had a young man who said that he had held his wife's hand to keep her from hitting him, and she called the police. Well, when we got a police report, the police report said that he had hit her with a fireplace poker on her right side near her liver. So a lot of these guys basically minimize, deny, and blame in both partner abuse and addiction. Addiction, basically, the person who has a substance use disorder tends to choose approving peers. They don't typically choose people who are clean to be their partners. They usually choose someone who's using. The same thing with partner abuse. Partner abusers tend to associate with people who have the same worldview. Both are characterized by lying and manipulating. Both lack predictability. The addict can't predict what he might do, nor in partner abuse may not be able to predict the severity of the abuse. Both affect family members, and family members develop certain roles to live in dysfunctional families. In some work done by Sharon Wishala Cruz, she said that people take on what she called survivor roles. And one of the survivor roles was the enabler. In addiction, you have the enabler who won't let the person hit bottom. And in family violence or partner abuse, the person won't call the police because they don't want to have the person locked up. That's called the enabler. In both of those, we also have the scapegoat. The scapegoat in alcohol is one who becomes an addict. The scapegoat in family partner abuse is the one who becomes just like the perpetrator. Both of them have what we call the lost child. The lost child is the person who can't deal with the drinking and the drugs and sort of isolates and gets away into their own head. And in family violence, you got people who deny or don't want to deal with the abuse that occurs in the family. I know growing up, I grew up in a domestic violence home, and my oldest brother, he could sleep through a tornado if my mother and father were having a serious disagreement, where I was always very active. I was a person who didn't like it, would come and get engaged and try to referee or stop them from going at it. Then we have the hero. I guess the hero takes on as the standard bearer of the family, and says, "Don't look at my family, look at me," and works real hard at covering up the pain by becoming either a workaholic or a doaholic. So we have those roles. Both of these are have high rates of relapse after a period of apparent change. Both addiction has a dismal recovery rate, and partner abuse has a dismal recovery rate. So partner abuse doesn't go away when a person starts the recovery process. We know that some abusers may become more irritable when in recovery from not drinking and take it out on family members. They don't have their medication, so to speak, to keep them calm. Others may become more controlling when sober than they were while they're drunk. And abusers may use their recovery program as a weapon against their partners. He may insist that she's an alcoholic even though she drinks moderately, or he may criticize her for being in denial about her drinking. And we also know this, that if the victim, like the abuser, intoxicated, they may not like them sober. And if they like them sober, they may not like it when they're intoxicated. So we have that dynamic going on as well. Well, one of the things I think that college students need, and particularly our male students, because a lot of our males have inadequate partnering skills. And so we need to help them understand the stages of a relationship. Most college students will get at the romantic stage, and that's that falling in love stage. That's that sort of, it feels like you're on amphetamines, you're just feeling good whenever you're in the company of the person. On average, this lasts for about 90 days. Some people can keep it going for at least 2 years. During this period, you're sort of fronting. And what I mean by that is that you're acting like the other person wants you to be. You're not really forthright with who you really are. Also, this time in the romantic stage is characterized by the individual spending a lot of time together, shopping together, going on picnics, doing a lot of things that force them to spend time. Not only that, they talk on the phone. Sometimes they just hold the phone without anything to say. And then this period is also characterized by hot, good sex. Well, you know that there's a term called hedonic adaptation, that we have a tendency to become used to things pretty quickly, particularly good things, and we begin to take them for granted. And during the romantic stage, after that 90 days, the real individual starts to show up, and then we move into a power struggle stage. During the power struggle stage, that's when issues may become more discernible. That's when power and struggles start to show up. Now the couple might struggle over who pays the bills, who goes to work, how much they're going to spend, who you can see, what kind of clothes you can wear, where you've been, a lot of questioning during this stage. And the couple begins to struggle, and power becomes an issue in the relationship. Now, for the victim who's experiencing power and struggling with issues in the relationship, they may feel like the only way for me is to get out of this relationship. And so the relationship ends. And unfortunately, both the perpetrator and the victim will head back into another relationship. And they will start the romantic stage over again. And there are a lot of perpetrators, batterers, who are what I call serial romantics. They are good at having a person fall in love with them, but they're weak in maintaining a relationship. They don't have longevity relationship skills. If a couple can make it through the power and struggle stage, and in order to make it through the power and struggle stage, the couple has to understand the power of the 3 C's. The first C is communication. And if a couple is to get past the power and struggle stage, they must learn to listen to each other. The next C basically is be able to compromise. That in a relationship there is more compromise, meaning getting to a win-win where we get synergy. And the last one is the commitment to the process, that we will listen and that we will compromise. If they're able to do those 3 C's, then they're able to move into the next stage, and that's the intimacy stage. And I've heard it said that the word intimacy means into me I see. And basically the person looks into the other person, is able to see and understand the other person. You know, love is made up of many elements, but one of the major elements, or 2 of the major elements, is understanding and kindness. And so when we get a couple to understand your partner and be kind to your partner, then those things can move and the trust can grow and develop. But those are the stages of a relationship. Well, what ends these relationships in college students? Well, let's take a look. Some of the things that cause a relationship to start in college, and it seems like weaknesses. Some people are very needy. Their emotional needs met through relationships where companionship, friendship, overcoming loneliness, compassion, and happiness are the key motives. These people are relationship seeking because out of for loneliness and just to have somebody there. Others seek love, romance, and the desire for affection. You know, they desire love, they need love, and for the first time they found someone who is exclusively theirs. And then some people in college, they're looking for a husband or a wife, somebody who can help them accomplish their vision. So they're looking for stability and the desire for children, which total 8 responses in this 8 responses in that survey. Reasons that college students gave for ending a relationship. Cheating was the most frequent reported cause of breakups, 43.2%. Infidelity. Abuse, violence, and control comprised 32.5% of the reasons. And then family interference was reported as the 3rd most common cause of breakups. And former partners' abuse of addictive substances such as alcohol, illegal drugs, or medications constituted 12.5% of the overall reasons for breakups. So I guess one of the things that we can help African American college students do is understand the impact of cheating and what cheating does to both individuals, and also teach them that abuse and control tactics are the second reason that people break up, and how to overcome those 2 things. The top 7 reasons given why college students are reluctant to report dating abuse. As we said earlier, that a lot of college students either don't know how or don't report dating violence. 62% think that it will make it worse for the victim, meaning that if they tell, the aggression might become more intense. 6% feel it's none of their business, so they're going to stay out of it. 60% think that it will hurt their relationship with the victim, meaning that if I tell, the victim may turn on me and not want to be my friend anymore. 56% of that group said that they know the suspected abuser. So sometimes, those friendship bonds are stronger than reporting bonds. 56% said that they are afraid of the abuser might make their life worse or on campus. 53% said they are afraid that people who know it was them who reported it, so that's why they didn't tell them, because they don't want to maintain their anonymity. And then 52% said they're afraid of getting hurt themselves. As we said, college students don't know how to get help. So we have to help them get help. And I think that our college counseling centers have to become much more visible, particularly around this issue of dating violence. And dating violence should not just be in October when we have domestic violence month. It should be 12 months a year that we should have at least one campaign every month to raise awareness of abuse on campus, particularly dating abuse, alcohol and drug related. Every student should be required to go through a dating violence awareness program. Well, violence and abusive dating behaviors, let's take a look. What controlling behaviors we know is one: told me where to live on off campus, prevented me from participating in sports or other extracurricular activities, controlling me, told me which classes to take, where to take those classes, when to take them. Another violent behavior in dating relationships, verbal abuse, threaten to hurt me. If you break up, name calling. We all know what physical abuse is. Abuse via technology, excessive texting, constantly on social media sites, threatening to expose certain pictures or videos that the person may have that caught them in a moment of indiscretion. Sexual abuse, pressuring the person to have sex, forcing them to have sex. And then forced substance abuse. Research indicates that most women basically are introduced to drugs and alcohol by their partner. So, in closing, let's take a look at how these intersect. Substance abuse and family violence intersect in various ways. Any mood-altering substance is capable of promoting aggression, but no such substance inevitably does so. Many individuals with anger and aggression problems also have substance abuse problems, so there's this comorbidity between the two. And there may be no intrinsic connection between the two conditions. They're independent variables, so that treatment for one would not have any impact on the other. So what can we do in conclusion? We can educate participants in prevention programs on the effects of alcohol on aggression behavior, and that alcohol use does not excuse one's aggressive behavior. A person can't say, oh, I was drinking, or I'm sorry, I was drunk. Participants can be informed that there are factors that are likely to interact with alcohol to increase one's risk for aggression, like childhood abuse history, trait anger, hostility. And participants could be informed of the dangers of consuming alcohol, but one may have predispositions to behave aggressively. And furthermore, information on the effects of alcohol on reduced risk perception, which may increase one's risk for victimization, could also be provided. Prevention programs will need to focus efforts on targeting multi-risk factors of aggression, such as anger and emotional dysregulations, looking at the beliefs that a lot of perpetrators have about aggressive behavior, and look at communication skills, understand the difference between aggressive, assertive, passive-aggressive skills, and alcohol use. Participants should be screened, particularly for those factors. And in addition, because it appears that drug use may play a role in dating violence for a small number of individuals, screening for drugs should be taking place. Well, I want to thank you for your attentiveness and participation. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Joan. And I want to thank you for your time and hope to see you soon on another webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gary. Dr. Harrington, would you like to present the closing remarks?
Yeah, we would like to again thank Gary Boyd for the excellent presentation on safety and sobriety in dating relationships. And we extend our congratulations to him. And also he comes to us by way of SATTC, of whom we have partnership with the HBCU Center of Excellence. And certainly we want to thank all the participating persons who signed on for this wonderful webinar. And if you have further questions or would like a copy of this presentation, please contact us at 1-866-988-4228, or you can visit the website, which is www.hbcucfe.net. And thanks to all, and this is Dr. Harrington signing off.